Greetings and salutations, and welcome back to yet another episode of my human rogue leveling time lapse. This time we are leveling from level 33 to level 34. Today I pick up the question, is Classic WoW harder than Retail WoW? It was actually suggested to me by one of my friends that could be an interesting topic to discuss. So initially it seems like, well, not a straightforward question, but it's actually a fairly broad question, I would say, because there are several things to even the definition of being hard. But before we go into that, I think it's also important to distinguish between vanilla and classic, and why, you would say. And the thing is that even though classic was built to be like vanilla, back when we played vanilla it was a different time. So there's a few factors to take into account when we're talking about back in time. Because back then, communication was a bit less mainstream than it is today. Today it's easy to facilitate getting a Discord server up or something compared to setting up a Ventrilo or TeamSpeak or whatever we used back in the day. Secondly, there is already a huge World of Warcraft community, and when Classic launched, a lot of these people came back from retail to try out the game. And there might also have been a lot of players back in vanilla, that's not what I'm saying, but these players come with a huge amount of knowledge compared to back then about the game, about the whole genre. There's a lot of knowledge, and also from various private servers that have been, you could say, stuck in the classic era or the vanilla era, that have been testing and trying a lot of things, so there's definitely a lot more knowledge about all the encounters as well today. So when I compare retail to classic, I'm not comparing retail to vanilla in my opinion. I'm comparing it to classic as it is now, today, with all the knowledge and all the meta around it. So for the remainder of this video, you can consider that the difference between vanilla and classic. If you agree or disagree, we can discuss that. You're welcome to leave a comment about that, but for the sake of this video, that is the difference. So I'm basing a lot of these arguments on a bit of research I did and on my own experience. So I have experience with playing back in vanilla, and I played in Burning Crusade, and I played in Wrath of the Lich King, where I started being more casual about the game. And I played throughout Warlords of Draenor, and I actually stopped in the beginning of that because there I kind of lost interest in the game. So keep that in mind. If newer things and cooler things, better things has happened in the game after, I might not be aware of that. So if there are any perspective you can offer with your knowledge about that, you are very welcome to do so. Okay, so let's jump into it. First off, the definition of hard is the very subjective part in my opinion, and that is probably the key element of the discussion. Because what is hard? So there are at least two factors to this. First off, you need to invest more time in the game to go somewhere. Just the leveling part alone requires a way bigger amount of time than it does in retail. So that raises the first question, is time investment something that makes it harder? Is the game harder because you need to invest more time in it? And the thing is, I don't think there's a definite answer to that question, because for some people would consider that harder because it can be hard to put in all the dedication, all the time that you need to do it, either because you don't have that time in real life or just because you're not good at focusing so much time on one thing at a time. So if you are a casual player that maybe plays a computer game 1 hour, maybe 2 hours a week, then it will take you ages to go anywhere in World of Warcraft. Although this may also be true for the retail version, it's definitely true for Classic. Apart from the overall time investment, you also spend a lot of time doing basically nothing. I suppose there's a reason why the joke World of Warcraft kinda came up when Classic came out, because especially until you get your first mount, you do a lot of walking around. A lot of the time you spend is just traveling. Also when you are dying, you spend a lot of time traveling back to your corpse, because the graveyards are placed in positions that usually make the busy areas far away from the graveyard. On top of that, there are quite a few quests that send you all around the world. Some of them of course do that to kinda encourage you to go to a new zone that is appropriate for your level, but sometimes there are just quests that send you back to lower level zones or to a higher level zone, so you have to wait a while to get there and things like that. So there's definitely a lot of travel time involved. I'm not saying this is not true for the retail version either, but it definitely more obvious in the retail version. And it's clear that it's kind of a way to make people stay in the world for a longer time. It is a way to stretch the experience, so you just don't go outside and there's just monsters lined up that you can just grind through and get to level 60. Which leads to the next question. So is grinding hard? Because there are quests. There's a lot of quests in the classic version. And I think there's quests enough so you can only quest to max level. But you would need to travel a lot back and forth to kinda optimize that. Which means that most likely you will be grinding on some mobs once in a while or doing instances. But either way, there will be grinding involved. Way more than there are in the retail version. So I know for the most part, up until now, I've been focusing on everything related to leveling. But leveling, especially for a new player, is a huge part of World of Warcraft. Also, if you start going into having an alt or two, the leveling experience still takes a lot of time, even though you can support that from your main character's income to buy better gear and all that. But let's assume you are now level 60 and now we are headed for the end game. You still need to go out there, you still need to spend time on grinding your money and grinding your whatever materials you need for your craft if you have any of those, because you need better gear. That is also true for retail, but in Classic here you don't have like your own farm that generates money for you over time, or your own garrison as you had in Warlords of Draenor, where you could earn a ton of gold after you kind of set it up. There was a lot of potential in earning money, but just for logging in once or twice a day. But in Classic you still need to invest time and do the grind to get what you need. Then there's the whole quality of life aspect of things. So in retail you can have several specs and you can switch between those almost at will, whereas in Classic you need to go and respec every time, which is a costly affair. Also in retail there's a flying mount that makes it way easier to get around. Fair enough, whenever there's a new expansion coming out, there is a time where you cannot, at least in the new areas, fly, but over time you're allowed to do that, and then you can get around very easily to farm your herbs or your materials, your iron or whatever you need. Whereas in Classic you're still forced to do it the more, you could say, laborious way. Then there's also the social aspect of things. So in retail you can just use the dungeon finder to find yourself a group fairly quickly, and you can use the raid finder to find a raid fairly quickly and get your gear up and so on and so forth. Of course there's still the mythic difficulty and all that, but you still get to experience the content, which is fairly easy, and you get to experience the bosses. I know the mechanics aren't the same on the harder difficulties, but the barrier to entry is definitely lower in the retail version. We could go way into more detail with all of these points, but we also have the time constraints of this video, so let's try to boil it down a bit. So by now it almost sounds like that I'm just gonna say yes, Classic is way harder than retail, because I basically just said that it's more time consuming, it's more grindy, the social aspect of it, the quality of life tools are almost non-existent in the Classic version. And that is only partially true, because in my opinion Classic is harder than retail. But keep in mind, I haven't done any of the mythic raids and all that, so I don't have those to compare when we are looking at the raid experience exclusively. But if you're looking at the overall gameplay experience of leveling your characters and earning gold and all that, I would say it's definitely harder. And it's harder because I have to invest more time and I have to grind more. So I'm good at grinding. I like grinding. I think I mentioned in one of my earlier videos that I managed to do the insane achievement on my priest back in retail, which entails a lot of grinding. And I would probably still do that if I had the time in my real life to do this, because I don't mind dedicating myself like that, because I actually enjoy grinding for the most part. But now, when I'm playing the game, maybe I'm also at a different place in my life than I was back when I played it before, but I find Classic very frustrating compared to retail. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying frustrated in the sense that I don't want to play this game. Well, there are some times where I stop playing because I got too annoyed by PvP or whatever. But these days when I play a game, I sit down and play a game because I want to be entertained and not to feel punished. And being frustrated in a game can also be entertaining because that kind of gives you this drive that, oh, you want to get back in the seat, or also that the sense that you can actually lose something, either be that progress or gear or money or whatever. It's also a good factor that makes the game feel more real, and if there's no risk, of course, then the game gets boring and too easy. I get all that, but it's also a balancing act, especially for these games where you invest a lot of time. So take Stranglethorn Whale as we are in here, for example, right? That I've had many times where I get ganked in PvP over and over. That would also happen in retail, I'm very sure about that, and that's maybe just a general World of Warcraft thing. But that is also sometimes a frustrating part if a high level dude just comes and whack you because he's bored, and then you need to spend the next 5 minutes running to the graveyard, and then that happens again and again. But the thing is, why should I be punished with 5 minutes every single time I make a small mistake or something happens that is outside my control? I think that part can at times be frustrating. And then we go back to the time part of it, because when things like this starts to happen, that I feel like I'm investing a lot of time with very little progression or reward, I start feeling that I'm actually wasting my time and I could spend my time doing other things. And that happens sometimes for me while I play Classic. Don't get me wrong, again, I'm not saying I'm being close to quitting the game or anything, but if these feelings kind of get provoked from a game, I think something went wrong at some point. And then let's quickly say a few words on the endgame content, because what I really like though is the difficulty of obtaining equipment in the endgame. I like the feeling back in the day that it was almost like very rare and unique to have a few epic items on you, and people would send you whispers and where did you get that and stuff like that. Whereas in retail it's just like, yeah, everyone has it. There's nothing special about it anymore. And I think it's fair that things are special in games, and people that are willing and able to dedicate themselves should be rewarded with that. There's no doubt about it. But these are also factors that you as a player can influence, because it's all based on your effort, how much effort you put into it. We can talk about random number generations, RNGs and all that, of how lucky or unlucky you are with your drops in Molten Core and whatnot, but that's a different discussion, and I think that issue is also there in retail. Maybe in a lessened sense because of all the tokens that drops instead, but let's not get into that now. So I think my own personal conclusion to this would be that yes, I think Classic is harder than retail. But I don't think it's necessarily harder in the sense that whatever instance from retail is harder than whatever instance from Classic, but as an overall experience, I need to invest more time, and I need to grind more, and I get punished some more in Classic, which for me makes the game more difficult. Anyways, I hope this all kind of made sense. I have been rambling quite a long time, and I had to cut and paste a bit to kind of make it fit into this self-imposed constraints that is the length of the time lapse. Anyways, I think we're just about to hit that level up. And here we are. So if you have any comments or you want to put your input out there, definitely do that and leave them in the comments down below. And if you like what we're doing here, consider to leave a like and also hit that subscribe button if you're new. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and you'll see me in the next video.